The cave breathed in soft pulses of light. The cave breathed in soft pulses of light. Crimson sat cross-legged on a low platform of smooth black crystal, sleeves rolled up, a half-etched seal spread across the low table in front of him. Thin threads of teal signal drifted between his fingers and the geometric lines on the plate, slow and uncertain. He was still bad at this part. The channeling came when it felt like it, never when he tried to force it the way the Academy texts described. Around him, the will-o-wisps floated. 5 of them today. Little rounded bodies of warm light, edges slightly blurred like steamed glass, each no bigger than a closed fist. One drifted lazy circles above his left shoulder. Another rested against the curve of his neck as if it had decided that was its place for the morning. A third bumped gently into a hanging crystal cluster and made a clear, bell-like note. Crimson smiled without looking up. "Careful," he murmured. "You break that one and the whole west wall goes dim again." The soft one bobbed once, unrepentant, then floated over to investigate a stack of half-finished circuit quill pens. To him they had always been like this. Warm. Slightly ridiculous. Emotionally obvious in the way small animals were. When he was tired they pressed closer. When he laughed they scattered and reformed like excited sparks. He had tried, once or twice, to send them away. They simply returned within the hour, patient and glowing, as if the idea of leaving had never really registered. Outside the cave, people called them other names. He preferred not to think about that in the mornings. Crimson adjusted the seal plate and tried the channeling sequence again. A thin ribbon of teal light rose from the crystal lattice in the wall, passed through his palm, and sank into the etching. For a moment the lines brightened. Then the ribbon stuttered, frayed, and faded. He exhaled through his nose and sat back. Still not clean, he told the soft one near his shoulder. "You'd think after all this time I'd get a proper teacher. Or a license. Or at least a manual that didn't assume I already knew the bloodline diagrams." The soft one made a low, soft hum that might have been sympathy or might have been boredom. He reached up and brushed a knuckle along its side. The surface gave slightly, warm and resilient, like dense foam under silk. "Yeah," he said. "I know. Tuesday." Somewhere deeper in the cave a crystal panel chimed the hour. Soft amber light washed across the gem walls, catching on shelves of scavenged tools, coiled signal wire, and the long curtain of living quartz that separated his sleeping alcove from the workspace. The will-o-wisps brightened in response, their round bodies casting gentle moving shadows across the stone. Crimson stretched, joints clicking, and reached for the chipped mug of bitter root tea that had gone cold hours ago. One of the will-o-wisps immediately tried to climb into the mug. He redirected it with a finger. "That's not for you." It sulked in a slow downward drift until another one bumped it from the side. The two of them spun once in the air and then settled again, faintly pulsing. He watched them for a long moment, expression open and fond in a way he never let the townspeople see. Then he set the mug aside, rolled his shoulders, and looked toward the narrow tunnel that led outward, the only path between the luminous quiet of the cave and the ordinary world that flinched whenever he appeared with his companions in tow. Supplies were low. He would have to go down today. The will-o-wisps seemed to feel the decision. They drew a little closer, their light tightening, edges growing marginally sharper the way they always did when he approached the threshold. Crimson stood, gathered the empty supply bag, and spoke to them the way he always did before leaving. "Behave in public," he said mildly. "Or at least pretend you're not enjoying yourself so much." One of them nudged his cheek in what was almost certainly laughter. He smiled, pulled his coat on, and started toward the tunnel, the small constellation of warm lights rising with him like it was the most natural thing in the world. The tunnel out of the cave was narrow and slightly damp where the gem walls gave way to older stone. Crimson walked it without a light. He had made the trip so many times the turns lived in his feet. The will-o-wisps followed in a loose cluster, their warm glow reflecting off the uneven rock in soft, moving patches of amber and pale gold. At the threshold the air changed. Outside, the morning was cool and thin. A low mist still clung to the roots of the black pines that lined the upper path. Crimson paused just long enough to pull his coat closed and settle the empty supply bag on one shoulder. One of the will-o'-wisps immediately claimed the new high point, settling against the strap like a glowing shoulder ornament. Greedy, he told it. It pulsed once, pleased with itself. The path down toward town was a long, gradual switchback cut into the hillside. In the old days it had been a quarry track. Now it was just the way he came and went. Crimson walked at an easy pace, hands in his pockets, occasionally murmuring answers to soft chimes and bumps from the lights around him. To anyone watching from a distance, it would have looked like a man having an animated conversation with empty air while unnatural lights orbited him in slow, deliberate patterns. He knew how it looked. He had stopped trying to adjust for it years ago. Halfway down, the first of the outer markers came into view, a leaning post wrapped in faded warding ribbon. Someone had refreshed the knot recently. The ribbon was still a bright, nervous red. Crimson glanced at it, then at the soft one nearest his elbow. "They're still at it," he said mildly. "You'd think they'd get bored." The soft one drifted sideways and passed straight through the space where the ward would have had effect if it were anything more than cloth and hope. Nothing happened. They never did. Further down, the pines thinned and the first rooftops of the town became visible through the mist. Dark slate, narrow chimneys, the pale line of the river beyond. Smoke already rose from a few kitchens. Crimson felt the will-o'-wisps draw closer, their bodies tightening the way they always did when the settlement came into range. The warm, rounded quality he loved grew slightly denser, edges a little more defined. He had never found the right words for the change. It was subtle to him. He only knew that people in town always looked at them harder once this happened. He rounded the last bend and the lower path came into clear view. Two figures were on the road ahead, a woman with a market yoke and a boy of perhaps 12 carrying a net of winter roots. They saw him at the same moment. The woman stopped so abruptly that the yoke nearly slid from her shoulders. The boy's eyes went wide and fixed, not on Crimson's face, but on the lights moving around him. Crimson lifted one hand in a small, automatic greeting. Neither of them returned it. The woman muttered something sharp to the boy, shifted her grip on the yoke, and took a deliberate step off the path into the wet grass to give him a wider berth. The boy followed, still staring. One of the will-o'-wisps, curious, drifted a little farther forward than the others. The woman's face tightened with open revulsion. She looked away quickly, jaw set, and kept walking until she had put clear distance between them. Crimson watched them go, expression mild. "That was rude," he told the soft one that had wandered. "You're not even doing anything." It bumped lightly against his wrist in what might have been apology or might have been indifference. He gave it a gentle nudge back into the main cluster and kept walking. By the time he reached the first proper buildings, the street had already performed its usual quiet adjustment. A shop door that had been open clicked shut. Someone carrying a basket crossed to the other side of the lane without looking at him. A pair of older men standing near the well fell silent and found sudden interest in the state of the paving stones. No one spoke. No one challenged him. They simply made space, careful, practiced space, and waited for him to pass. Crimson walked through the middle of it the way he always did, will-o'-wisps drifting around him like a small, luminous tide, and tried to remember whether he still had enough dried bitter leaf at home or whether he would have to ask for that as well. It was, after all, only Tuesday. The supply post was a narrow building near the riverside of town, half shop and half storeroom. The woman who ran it, Mistress Kaelin, had dealt with Crimson longer than most. She did not like him. She also did not waste energy on open fear. Her method was simpler. She spoke as little as possible, set the goods on the outer counter, and never once looked directly at the lights that followed him. Today the counter already held a small crate. Dried root, salt, a coil of signal wire, 2 cakes of the bitter soap he used for cleaning crystal. Someone had clearly anticipated his usual list. Crimson stopped a polite distance away and waited. Mistress Kaelin appeared in the doorway, wiped her hands on her apron, and gave a single nod toward the crate. "Same as last time," she said. "Leave the chit on the post." He stepped forward, placed the marked wooden chit on the designated nail, and reached for the crate. One of the will-o'-wisps drifted too close to the counter edge. Mistress Kaelin's mouth tightened, but she said nothing. Crimson gently guided the light back with the back of his hand, the way another man might nudge a cat off a table. "Thank you," he said. She was already turning away. He lifted the crate. It was heavier than it looked. The will-o'-wisps adjusted their positions around him, 2 of them settling near the handles as if they intended to help. The weight did not change, but the gesture was familiar. He almost smiled. That was when the boy from the road earlier spoke. He had followed at a distance and now stood at the corner of the supply post, net of roots still clutched in both hands. His voice was thin but clear. "Why don't you send them away?" The street, already quiet, went quieter. Crimson looked at the boy. The will-o'-wisps looked with him, several of them drifting forward a little in open curiosity. The boy flinched but held his ground. "I've tried," Crimson answered honestly. "They come back. You're supposed to make them leave." The boy's face was pale, earnest, and already half regretting the words. "Everyone says you could if you wanted. They say you like them better than people." Mistress Kalen's voice cut across from the doorway, sharp. "Inside. Now." The boy hesitated, then retreated. A door closed harder than necessary. Crimson stood in the open lane with the crate in his arms and the will-o'-wisps orbiting in slow, uncertain arcs. He could feel the usual pressure of eyes from behind shutters and half-closed doors. It was the same pressure he had walked through for years. Only the boy's question still hung in the air, thin and accusing. He adjusted his grip on the crate and started back toward the upper path. He did not get far. At the edge of the square, a figure in formal dark green stood waiting. An academy courier, young, posture stiff with the effort of not staring at the lights. In one gloved hand, the courier held a sealed letter. The wax was black and stamped with a mark Crimson only half recognized, a circle of geometric lines around a single vertical stroke. The courier's voice was carefully neutral. "Crimson of the Upper Cave. You are requested to attend the regional channeling office within 3 days. The matter concerns unlicensed signal activity and the continued presence of unstable luminous entities under your proximity." The will-o'-wisps tightened around Crimson's shoulders. One of them made a low, questioning note only he seemed to find comforting. The courier extended the letter and, to their credit, did not step back when Crimson reached for it. Failure to appear, the courier added, will result in a formal clearance petition being raised with the town council. Then the courier turned and walked away at a pace just short of fleeing. Crimson stood in the middle of the quiet square, crate under one arm, sealed letter in the other, will-o'-wisps drifting in anxious little loops around his head. He looked down at the black wax. 3 days. He could ignore it. He had ignored quieter warnings before. The cave would still be there. The will-o'-wisps would still be there. The town would keep leaving supplies at a distance and pretending he was a weather problem that might eventually pass. Or he could go. He turned the letter over once, feeling the weight of the seal, and started walking again toward the path that led home. Behind him the will-o'-wisps followed, closer than usual, their light no longer quite as soft as it had been in the cave that morning. Crimson did not open the letter. He made it most of the way up the path with the crate under one arm and the sealed message still pinched between 2 fingers. The will-o'-wisps had calmed once the town was behind them, their light loosening again into the familiar warm, rounded shapes he preferred. One of them kept bumping the black wax seal with mild interest. He let it. At the cave mouth he set the crate down harder than necessary, rolled the stiffness from his shoulders, and looked at the letter for a long moment. The geometric stamp stared back. "Later," he said aloud. He flicked it onto the nearest shelf of raw crystal. It slid, caught against a coil of wire, and came to rest at an angle. One of the will-o'-wisps immediately floated over to investigate, nudging it with a soft chime. Crimson ignored both of them and began unpacking the supplies. Night settled early in the upper hills. By the time the last of the root and wire had been put away, the cave was lit only by the low ambient glow of the gem walls and the 5 will-o'-wisps drifting in lazy orbits. Crimson cleared the central platform, dragged the heavy seal plate into place, and Saturday. Channeling practice. He still hated the formal term. What he did never matched the diagrams in the few texts he had managed to trade for. Those assumed a licensed core, or a bloodline mark, or at least a teacher who had already opened the first gates. Crimson had none of those things. What he had was the will-o'-wisps, the resonant lattice of the cave, and a stubborn willingness to sit until something answered. He placed both hands flat on the plate. "All right," he murmured. "Show me." At first there was only the usual thin trickle, a pale teal thread rising from the crystal floor, passing through his palms, and sinking into the etched lines. The will-o'-wisps gathered closer, as they always did when he worked. Their light sank into his periphery until the air itself felt thicker, warmer, more willing. The trickle strengthened. Teal brightened toward a sharper cyan. The lines on the plate lit in sequence, one geometric gate after another, further than he had managed that morning. Crimson exhaled slowly and opened the channel wider. The cave answered. Veins of light raced across the gem walls in branching patterns, climbing toward the high ceiling. The will-o'-wisps began to move faster, circling him in a tightening spiral, their bodies leaving faint aftertrails of gold. He pushed. The platform under him vibrated. A low harmonic rose from the crystal lattice, not sound exactly, more a pressure behind the teeth. Sparks of excess signal leapt from the edges of the seal plate and were caught by the will-o'-wisps, who spun them into short-lived loops before letting them fade. Crimson's eyes watered. The golden irises he had been born with flickered, a brief, unstable wash of teal sliding across them and then receding. Still he held the flow. For a moment the entire cave was mapped in light. Every unfinished seal on the shelves, every coil of wire, every flaw in the living quartz curtain stood out in hard relief. He could feel the town far below as a distant cluster of faint, ordinary signals. He could feel the black wax letter on the shelf as a small, cold weight of official intention. And underneath it all he felt the will-o'-wisps not as separate lights but as extensions of the same current that was pouring through his hands, warm, insistent, and far larger than their small shapes suggested. The channel peaked. A single clean ring of cyan fire expanded from the plate, passed through Crimson's chest without heat, and washed across the cave walls before vanishing into the stone. The harmonic cut off. The light dropped back to the normal soft glow. Crimson swayed, catching himself on one hand, breathing hard. The will-o'-wisps slowed their orbit and drifted in close again, bumping against his shoulders and hair with obvious concern. He gave a rough, tired laugh and reached up to steady the nearest one. "I'm fine," he said. "Just further than last time." His hands were shaking. The seal plate still smoked faintly at the edges where the excess signal had burned the air. On the shelf the letter remained exactly where he had tossed it, black seal unbroken, already half forgotten under the residual thrum of power still moving through the cave. Crimson sat in the middle of the platform while his pulse settled, will-o'-wisps pressed gently against him on all sides, and stared at the faint teal afterimage that still ghosted across his vision. He did not look at the letter again that night.